Hi, this is Drew Dinsick here with NBC Sports Edge, and I am joined by the great Warren Sharp. Football is ever so close to kicking off, preseason action underway, and we get to talk about the NFC East first today, Warren. Let's break this division down a little bit. Current market has prices up for the Dallas Cowboys as favorites, plus 125 to win the East. Eagles, second choice here at plus 175. The Commanders currently lined at 5-1 to win the East, and the Giants picking up the rear, 7-1 long shots to win this division. Now, the Giants are an interesting place to start because this is a team that has completely reshaped the future of the franchise by bringing in the brain trust and offensive coordinator from the Buffalo Bills and Joe Shine and of course, Brian Daboll. And, you know, those are confident hires. Those are guys you feel good about building a franchise around if you're the Giants, I feel like. The question is it too much to expect these guys to have success coming into this season off the ground? Are they going to immediately find success, or will it take a couple of years for them to really work this franchise into a contender?
That's a great way to set up the question, Drew, because I do have a lot more optimism about this franchise right now and the direction that they're headed under these two gentlemen. That being said, they are working with the ingredients that were left behind by Dave Gettleman. I mean, so when you have these horrific ingredients in the kitchen, there's only so much you can do with what you've got. I think that they've got plans to do something better in the future. But right now, this season is really about figuring out what we're working with here. We have two extremely high draft picks, Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, who aren't even under contract next season. These guys, the New York Giants, can do whatever they want. And this team has been absurdly bad over the last 5 years. I think for 5 straight years, Drew, they're the only team in the NFL to never go over their win total once. They're also the only team in the NFL that has never had a single week during a season that they were above 500 at all. There was not a week 3. Are we 2-0? Nope, we're not 2-0 entering week 3. Were we ever 1-0? No, we were never 1-0. Were we ever 7-6 at any point? Nope, we were. They always have had a losing season in every single season for 5 straight years. So this fan base has zero hope or belief from what they've done, what they've seen done before. That being said, let's talk about 2022 because that's why we're all here. What is this team going to do this season? And I think that they do have some upside because last year's coaching staff seriously felt like it was just trying to get to third and manageable. They were trying not to put themselves too far behind the sticks, and it failed miserably. They were the least efficient offense, second least efficient offense on early downs of any team in the NFL over the last 2 seasons, and they were number 31 last season as well. And you would think, okay, they're not good at getting by third downs. They're finding themselves in third down a lot. Is that because they're trying to get the ball down the field? No, they're the least explosive offense in the entire NFL over the last 2 years as well. So what does this team need to do this year? Well, they've got to focus on both of those things. They've got to figure out a way to avoid third downs more frequently, and they got to figure out a way to be more explosive. And I was shocked when I looked back, Drew, at last year's statistics. League-wide, if you have 0 plays that gain 15-plus yards, you are going to score points 5% of your drives. If you have 1 play that gains 15-plus yards, you are going to score points over 50% of the time. So the New York Giants are going to need to try to get Daniel Jones to work the ball a little bit more down the field. I couldn't believe this other statistic that over the last 2 years, he has the best efficiency throwing the ball 30-plus yards down the field. His EPA per pass attempt on deep passes is better than any other quarterback in the NFL over the last 2 years. They just weren't doing it very much. So they need to stay healthy. They were very injured last year. I have high hopes for this team in the future. This year, I think they can maybe exceed their win total, but I haven't actually bet it because I don't feel confident enough in their ability with the players that they have there. They're going to have to pick up a totally new offensive system very quickly. I really see no rush to get ahead of that. I want to see how this team looks in the preseason and how Daniel Jones looks in Daboll's offense.
That is all completely fair, and especially because their win total has already taken a little bit of action to the over. We've seen the market adjust them up to right now. They are lined 7.5. If you want to play the over, it's plus 140. And if you want to cash the over, this team basically has to be 500 and get 8 wins this season. So I can completely understand the optimism, low bar for success, but maybe we wait for another year before we get too excited about this Giants rebuild. A team that is also catching a little bit of momentum in the market, surprisingly, is the Washington Commanders. They are also lined at 7.5 right now. However, if you want to bet that over, you got to lay minus 130. As we mentioned already, they're third choice in the NFC East at 5-1 to win this division. It kind of entirely breaks upon their decision at the quarterback position, because they made an acquisition last year, and it was bringing in Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz makes his grand return now to the NFC East. And I mean, I didn't see anything about his performance last year that made me, so convinced he is the guy that is going to rescue this franchise from irrelevance and bring them back into playoff success. However, Ron Rivera, he's a good leader of men. He, of course, has, been able to kind of succeed with, below replacement level quarterbacks at times over the balance of his career. So it wouldn't be the craziest thing to see this team surprise. But they do seem to have some holes and some inability to stay healthy that give me a little bit of pause. What is your current temperature on the Washington Commanders? Is this a team that you think is worth kind of keeping circled, keeping an eye on, could surprise, or do you think they're effectively an afterthought?
I'm conflicted with Washington, and it's because Carson Wentz is the best quarterback that this team has had in years from a talent perspective. But he's the least efficient quarterback in the NFL. He is the least accurate quarterback in the NFL over the last 2 years. Any quarterback that's thrown at least 600 attempts, nobody has a worse accuracy than does Carson Wentz. And every time you put this guy in a critical situation, whether it's certain third downs or down in the red zone, his brain just completely locks up. He just doesn't understand where the pressure is coming from. He has very little pocket presence, and he's very prone to taking a sack or throwing an interception. And these are things that are, of course, drive killers. And, he's murdered more drives than I think most men in the NFL the last couple of years due to these negative plays that he takes. So I am conflicted about Washington. I do think that they are going to have some success, and there's going to be spots that we can feel optimistic about them this season. But I'm not looking at really getting too bullish on them from a futures perspective. Also, this team is, in my opinion, very likely to have issues along that offensive line. Their O-line is viewed, like by Pro Football Focus and some others, as being like a pretty strong unit. But that's primarily because Scott Turner smartly chooses to get the ball out super quick. This team has had the quickest time to throw. They have the shortest depth of target of any team in the league over the last couple of seasons. And so that line really hasn't had to protect very much, hasn't had to prove that it could stand up. And so when Carson Wentz is holding the ball in there behind that line after he gets a snap, I just don't know how that line is actually going to hold up for a guy like him, who at times takes his time and has problems with his thinking process and is getting through progressions. So I like him in terms of the upside that he gives them, because he's better than what they've had, but I just don't know where their ceiling is, because he's been terrible at times.
Yeah. Only other thing I can add is health is a big concern for this team. It's a fragile team. They're not especially deep. Even Carson Wentz is a guy that I have questions if he'll be able to make it through a full season healthy. So easy pass on this team from a future standpoint. But like you mentioned, there may be some opportunities game by game to back them, particularly if they're catching points against a susceptible favorite. I don't know if I'll be backing them against the Eagles, however. The Eagles are a team that has kind of been the darlings, I guess, of the sharp community, of some of the analytical folks. And it's tough to say if this is entirely because they have absolutely stacked this roster with high-level talent, something that is afforded to them because they have one of the, if not the lowest, the lowest contract to their starting quarterback of any team in the NFL. But they have given him every opportunity in terms of putting talented pieces around him to allow him to succeed. And oh, by the way, they got about the easiest schedule in the NFL in terms of strength of opponent, particularly opponent quarterbacks that they're going to have to face over the balance of the season. Their current win total is 9.5, Warren, minus 125 now if you want to play the over. This has been a big mover, as the market, as I mentioned, has been hot on the Eagles. Are you there with this team? And if not the win total, how would you attack betting them in the futures market?
In the futures market, the fastest way to attack them, in my opinion, is just betting them to win this division because of something I'll be telling you about the Dallas Cowboys momentarily. And I do really think that this is kind of a two-horse race for 2022. But I like the direction that the Eagles are headed. Their upside, though, is going to be completely determined by Jalen Hurts and what he's able to do this year and the steps that he's able to take now that they have A.J. Brown. I mean, Howie Roseman has done everything in his power to kind of build this team and support a quarterback. And they're really trying to figure out, is Jalen Hurts the quarterback of the future? Because we have enough draft capital if he's not next year, especially with the Dolphins losing a first-round pick, Drew, today, that we can do something with the quarterback position next offseason. And so Philly's in that like really prime position in that catbird seat to make a decision next year about this quarterback, but they want to win now. Make no mistake about it. This front office, this owner really wants to win in 2022. And I think that they're going to have some success. They're built like an old school team in that offensive line, top 10 and in salary cap allocation. I think it's even top 5. Same thing on the defensive line. This team is built up front with good players along the lines. As long as those guys stay healthy, and especially with some of the free agent or draft acquisitions that they've made, they're going to be good at stopping the run, at protecting their quarterback, and trying to make opposing offenses a little bit more predictable. But this was also a team last year, Drew, came out very pass heavy, made a massive switch mid-season, went very run heavy. Are they going to be a little bit more balanced this season now that they've got more weapons at the receiver position and maybe feel a little bit more confident about Jalen Hurts? Because this always was a forward-looking operation in terms of the way that they're run. And we know passing is more efficient than running the football. And unless they're going to run Jalen Hurts like Lamar Jackson, you don't necessarily have an upside just calling a ton of running back carry plays in today's football. So they went 1 win and 7 losses in their 8 games last year against teams that finished with a winning record. They obviously fell out of the playoffs very quickly in their first game. This is a team that performed better than their record last season that has to make major improvements, but at least from a front office perspective, they've done as much as they could this offseason. Now it's up to health and quarterback development this year.
Yep. I generally echo those sentiments. And frankly, that record that you just pointed out about how poorly they did against winning teams has completely cooled me off on playing them to win, say, the NFC or the Super Bowl at good prices. And I'm going to save my Philadelphia Eagles tip for the end, but I do think there is a high payout way to attack this team. But plus 175 to win the East is absolutely worth having in pocket. We agree there. And that is because the Dallas Cowboys, even though they had took a step forward in not making the playoffs within a season they lost where Dak got injured to making the playoffs last year, winning 12 games. The expectation in the market for the Dallas Cowboys for 2022 is 2 things. Number 1, regression, mostly on defense. And number 2, Mike McCarthy may be on the hot seat here. This is all kind of surprising considering how much success they had last year. How do you explain sort of the market sentiment for this team? And do you think that is in any way that this is an overreaction and or is this spot on? Regression is coming.
I think regression is coming because of the one main thing that they did so differently than any other team. And that was all these takeaways. The EPA expected points added that they gained in their takeaways last season was the most for any team on the defensive side of the ball since 2012. They had 34 takeaways last season. The last time the Cowboys had 34 takeaways was 34 years ago. Okay, you think that this team is going to be able to replicate the EPA that they got when they were the first team to get that much since 2012, doing something that they hadn't done in 34 years previously? It's not going to happen. The takeaways are going to come back down to earth a little bit this season, even if their defense is as good as it was last year. They're just not going to get that many takeaways and turn those into that many points that they did. More pressure is going to fall on the offense, in my opinion, this upcoming season. And that's not a great place to be. I think the offensive line is a little bit weaker. We got Jerry Jones coming out and saying this offense runs through Zeke. We know that Tony Pollard is more efficient, has proven it, is younger, has less mileage on him. But Jerry wants to hitch that wagon to Ezekiel Elliott this season. We know that Jerry didn't feel like they needed Amari Cooper. He felt like they were great at the receiver position, and CeeDee Lamb, boom, key wide receiver number 1, easy. Well, that may be the case, that he's talented enough to take on that responsibility, and he might get a lot of yardage this season. But defenses are obviously going to be playing him a lot different when Amari Cooper's not on the other side. And then who are their 2s and 3s? They're going to need young guys. They've already had a couple of injuries. We know Michael Gallup isn't going to be returning for the beginning of the season. They just lost James Washington, who is going to play at the receiver position for, I think, 8 to 10 weeks. That assumes he recovers just fine from his foot breaking yesterday at camp. So there's a lot of things that I don't love about the Dallas Cowboys on both sides of the ball entering the 2022 season, which is why I'm more than happy, and I already took them under 10.5 wins.
That makes sense to me. They have, even beyond the turnover points that you made, which are extremely relevant, they had 9 touchdowns by either defensive return or kick return last year. Like, that is extremely unrepeatable. And, a couple ball bounces a little bit differently for them this year. They don't have quite as much, help from their defense in terms of scoring. Then it's going to be a lot tougher for them to find wins, which is why over 10.5 for them is plus 120. So if you think they even come close to repeating last year's success, you can get a plus money bet on their win total over. But I will be passing on that. Warren, what is your favorite way to attack this division?
We just discussed it. I like the under 10.5 for the Dallas Cowboys win total. I think this team does experience regression on the defensive side of the ball. I think their offensive upside is not there. I think they're still going to be trying to figure out how much they're running the football with Zeke. And I think those runs aren't going to be as efficient, though he will be a little bit healthier because the O-line isn't as good. And do you know that Zeke, one last stat to throw in here, Drew, Zeke has just standard replacement level production in terms of rushing yardage above expectation the last 2 seasons. So he's not doing anything more than just get the yardage that's being blocked for him by that line. And so if the line is worse and he's running more, this offense is not going to be as efficient on the ground. So I'm a little bit down on the Cowboys, under 10.5 for me.
Yeah, we're there. And the last fun sprinkle I can add here, if you're warm on the Eagles, and again, looking at that schedule being so easy, I can very clearly see a path where they get into the low teens here. 13, potentially 14 wins is sort of the ceiling of this team if Jalen Hurts takes any meaningful step forward, at which point you can get them most wins 20-1 for the Eagles. It is not, there are not a lot of easy schedules in the NFL these days, but the Eagles managed to find their way into one. So it is at that point, I think we can wrap up any enthusiasm about the NFC East, because realistically, it would be surprising if any of these teams are a factor in terms of who wins the NFC ultimately. So with that, let's put a bow on this division, and best of luck. Fly, Eagles, fly.